Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode 99. I hope everybody is having a great week out there. I hope you are staying safe and staying healthy during the global pandemic. This has just been completely bizarre. I don't know about you guys, but I am having some pretty serious live show withdrawals right now. I just hope everybody is staying as safe and socially distant as they possibly can. I hope all is going well for all of you guys, and I promise we're going to be back to normal before too long. We have just such an awesome interview for you today. This one is one that I've been waiting on for quite some time. I'm going to be joined in just a moment by the fantastic Patrick Muzingo from the band Junkyard, one of my all-time faves. This one's been a long time in the making, and I had a whole lot of fun doing this. So stay tuned after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks.
The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks.
All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned, we're going to be joined by Pat Muzingo here in just a moment. Patrick he's first of all, a wonderful human being. And I'm very pleased to say that I've gotten to know him here over the last couple of years. We are both artists on the Los Cabos Drumsticks artist roster, so I've kind of got to know him that way. And we've been talking about doing this for a long time, and we finally found a time where both of us could get on the phone and chat. Patrick has played drums in several different bands over the years. He's played with just tons and tons of great talent. Most people know him mostly from his work with Junkyard, which is one of my all-time favorite bands, but he's also played in Speed Buggy USA, Shanghai, America's Hardcore. Just a phenomenal drummer and just such a nice guy. So I'm just so pleased. I'm gushing here a bit, but I was just so pleased to do this, and I got to ask all of the silly fanboy questions that I've always wanted to know about Junkyard. So without further ado, please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Patrick Muzingo. Pat, how are you, brother? How are things?
I'm in lockdown. I want to leave my house, but I can't. Not allowed unless I have a mask on now.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's these are crazy times we're living in for sure. And listen, this one is long overdue. I certainly appreciate you taking time to come on the Drum Shuffle. We really do appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, you and I have been, I guess, social media friends for quite some time. We're both artists with Los Cabos Drumsticks, so that's kind of how.
Oh, we got to plug the best drumsticks on the market.
Absolutely,
bar none.
Absolutely. So, this show has only had one sponsor in its 2-year life, and that is Los Cabos Drumsticks. So,
great.
Yeah. So the Guays are just a wonderful family. That's.
Oh yeah, really amazing. I mean, they're a stick company that they kind of remind me of the way Vic Firth was in the '80s. I mean, the Firth family was such that stick company was so amazing. The whole family. I mean, it was such a grassroots kind of thing, and then. Unfortunately, as things go, and they blew up, and they became a little more. They became really big, and it happens. But Los Cabos, oh God, that company has just been fantastic. I think I've been with them now since 2016.
Yeah, and I think that's about the time that I signed with them. I think maybe it was early 2017 for me. I can't remember, but. That's how you and I first connected,
right.
in our circles. But, I have been a huge fan of Junkyard since day one. I mean, I just can't say that enough. And I've told you before, when I first started playing, I think I got my first kit in 1988, I want to say.
Oh, okay.
And
that's about right when I got my first real kit.
That's so funny.
You get signed, and then all of a sudden, you spend your whole life buying gear and all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you sign a deal, and everybody's giving you stuff for free, and it's like, wait a minute, what? Where were you guys in 1982 when I was in my punk rock band buying cymbals from a pawn shop?
Exactly.
That were cracked already?
Yeah, that's so funny. Well. And back in those days, I guess you did get gear for free. People ask me all the time about, this whole endorsement thing. They're like, oh, it must be nice getting your stuff for free. And I'm like, guess again.
Well, it's not really for free. I mean, back then it was, because it was basically it was such a typical model where no matter what record deal you signed back in I would say from probably, 87, probably. I don't really have any kind of experience being signed with a major before 1987 because I was on a bunch of independent labels. But once you got that, I guess you call it the brass ring, then all of a sudden the Pearl Drums and Vic Firth and Zildjian, all these people come out of the woodworks and they're like, oh, we'll pick you up. And you go in and meet with these people and they're like, what do you want? And I'm like, well, me being, I wasn't going to take advantage of it. I'm like, I need a couple of crash cymbals and a ride. They're like, oh, we'll take, 2 ride cymbals, 4 crash cymbals, 2 sets of hi-hats. I'm like, I don't need that. I just need the bare minimum.
Yeah. Well, back in those days, it was all about the video, right? Getting their gear on MTV, which, that doesn't really exist anymore. But but before I get too far down the rabbit hole of all that,
that's a big rabbit hole too. Endorsements. Oh boy.
Man, it really is. But people ask me all the time, it must be nice getting free stuff. And I'm like, man, it is not like that at all. It's
and it ain't free. I mean, it's every once in a while, DW will kick me down something for free, but it's, it's few and far between the free stuff.
Yeah, it really is. It's, it's not about that. And I try to explain that to people and they just don't, for whatever reason, they don't understand. But let's go back a little bit because I want to start at the very beginning. Now you're an LA guy. You grew up in Southern Cali. And it's interesting because you had kind of a fork in the road when you were a youngster. You were a pretty good skater. I mean, you grew up in that skateboard culture of Southern California, and you were friends with some some heavy hitters in the skating world, but at some point you had to decide, am I going to be a professional skater, or am I going to be, am I going to follow the music path? But talk to me a little bit about growing up in Southern California and when you first picked up sticks, and walk us through that chronological progression in your life.
So basically, it kind of started off, in the, my whole family came from a music background. My brother started off in high school, and he was in the Eagle Rock Jazz Band. And it kind of basically like a backstory of Eagle Rock, California, which is right between Pasadena and Glendale in northeast Los Angeles. Eagle Rock had a really good jazz program with a teacher named John Ronaldo, who was really huge in the jazz community in the 50s and 60s. So he ended up retiring and started teaching at Eagle Rock High School, and his main focus was, to teach kids about jazz. So and the funny thing is, like, I went to the same high school that my mom went to. So the whole family went to the same high school.
That's cool.
And it was a weird high school because it was combined. It was 7th through 12th grade. So it was junior, senior high school combined. So you had, I don't even know how many people were in school at one time. It was like 3,000 people or something.
Oh, wow.
So it was a lot of people, but so my brother started off playing trumpet, and then my sister was playing trombone, and they went from the junior jazz band to the senior jazz band. And I was the little kid that was always drug around by my parents. So I would always go to the Sunday night jazz concerts and that they would have, where it would always be like the opening act was the junior jazz band, then the middle slot act was the senior jazz band, and then the headliner was anybody that the musical teacher could grab. So at one point it would be Buddy Rich or Shelly Mann or Louis Bellson, or, oh my God, there was just so many people growing up. So I was the little kid. I was like the little kid that they would like throw in the mix. And at that point I was just a little skate rat, and I know that I wanted to play music, but I just didn't know what I really wanted to do, if it was going to be drums or bass or guitar. I knew that I didn't want to play a wind instrument because it just seemed like more of a pain in the ass. It seemed more of a workout to like play trumpet than play drums.
Yeah.
But that being said, I got to hang around with like a lot of great musicians. One of which was that was kind of an influence on me. I would say probably when I picked up the sticks was Carlos Vega, and at that point, he was just he's a high school drummer, and but there was something about him that was amazing, and he asked me if I wanted to take a few lessons. So I took a few lessons from him, and at that point, that's when I decided, I think I want to pick up the sticks, and so he kind of guided me that way. So I started off really playing jazz, and then went into marching band, which is probably the main reasons why I play my sticks backwards, because that's the only way you can really be heard. You got to beat the crap out of those things in marching band. And that was back in the day when, I played, I think second snare or something, and the sticks they gave me were those big old Ludwig, like I think they were 2S or 3S. I mean, these things were like
trees,
huge logs.
Yeah.
And the director was like, no, you got to play those things backwards to be heard. So he's like, hit harder. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. And so that's how I ended up like having that style of just playing the sticks backwards. Plus, as things go on and you play in loud rock bands, you need to be heard because you're like say in 1980, you're at a rehearsal studio. They didn't mic up the drums back then. So you had to beat the crap out of them to compete against some guy with a damn Marshall stack and a bass player with like 2 SVT cabinets. It's like, well, I can barely hear my snare drum. So you just have to beat the crap out of them.
Yeah, for sure.
So during that period, I was skating, and I was a couple friends of mine had built a ramp down the street from my mom's house. And so we had kind of an X Games style ramp, I would say in probably 1979, 1978, we started building these humongous ramps, and we never really let anybody in that we didn't know. So it was the core 5 of us that skated. And then I think what was it? I think, going forward a little bit to probably 1982, this skater guy, Lance Mountain, decided he was going to come and take some pictures of the ramp and feature it in a magazine called Trans World Skateboard Magazine. So he shot us and he interviewed us, and at that point, that's when all of a sudden we were getting really good, and also skating in competitions against people like Lance Mountain, Jeff Grosso, Eric Nash, Neil Blender, Tony Hawk, Steve Caballero, all those guys. And we were these 5 little skate rats from Eagle Rock, and nobody knew anything about Eagle Rock back then. So we would like come in and we would just be like, and of course this was pre-punk rock. So we come in just, 5 little stoner kids from Eagle Rock coming in and taking over the place. And 9 times out of 10, we would not do well because we were skating in pools. And when you skate in a pool, it's a big difference between skating in a pool and skating in a ramp. So we would come in and we would be ramp skaters, and we were like, oh, we don't even know how to carve this pool. But we would do the tricks on the wall. So we would, we would gain a little bit of notoriety as the 5 little lunkheads from Eagle Rock. But we did well on contests. I think at one point, the highest I ever ranked in a contest was probably, 1980. I got 5th place out of 20 guys. And I think one of the guys could have been, it could have been Hawk. I'm not sure, because Hawk is a little younger than me. So, I'd have to look back on the clippings on that. My mom has all that stuff. So, but we were, we were in there. We were, I guess, basically like 2nd or 3rd generation Southern California skaters. Just went out there and skated skated 24/7.
Yeah, that's amazing to me that you dropped some pretty huge names in there, in the skating world. So you grew up around all those guys, and I know that punk was like a really big thing for you. So when kind of the punk rock scene started exploding, I'm guessing that really drew you in more on the music side. Is that a fair assumption on my part?
What was that, on the punk rock stuff?
Yeah, so it was punk what drew you to the music side of your life more?
It was funny because, like, basically skating, like, punk rock that's how I kind of discovered punk rock I kind of discovered punk rock, as crazy as it sounds, via Kiss, via, like, looking in Cream magazine and seeing Kiss and, Aerosmith and all those bands, and especially Cream magazine, because they were basically, I think they were based out of New York. So all of a sudden, I'd look and see, oh, there's a new Kiss picture, there's a new Aerosmith picture or a new review of an album. But then all of a sudden in the back pages, there'd be the Ramones or the Sex Pistols. Yeah. And I was like, who are these bands? These guys are weird. It's like, these guys don't make any sense, and I have no idea what they sound like. So I finally went down to the record store and I picked up Nevermind the Bollocks and put it on, and it was like all of a sudden a light went off in my head. It was like, whoa, this is really cool. And fuck Kiss, Sex Pistols. And then that went down the whole rabbit hole of finding, the Clash and the Damned and, the Ramones. I think when I started off playing and listening to punk rock, it was mostly British punk rock more than stuff in L.A. Because the stuff in L.A. was, I think back then, the biggest bands were like Germs and X and Black Flag. And I used to go see all those bands, but there was something about them that... they didn't have the flair, I guess, that the British punk bands had. Yeah. And the music was, music was a little more hard edge, where the British stuff was pretty much, if you listen back to it, it was pretty much like pop music.
Yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. So I'm guessing around this time is when you started forming your first bands as a youngster. And now I've heard this story, and I don't know if it's true. So let's put all the rumors to rest.
Okay.
The rumor that I have heard is one of the very first bands that you joined was called the Atoms, ATOMS, the Atoms.
Yeah.
And you replaced a young guy by the name of Jeff Isbell on drums. And
Jeff
Isbell is probably better known by his stage name of Izzy Stradlin. He decided to play guitar. Is that a true story?
Yeah. So what it was is when I all of a sudden, when I chopped my hair off and decided, okay, I'm going to be a punk rocker, and I go out to these shows, and at that point, I don't think I was really looking for a band to play in, because I didn't have a car. My drum set was really janky, and I had never played with anybody before. I just played in my tin shed in my parents' backyard, which I'm sure the neighbors hated. But but at least they got to hear me as I progressed, I guess.
Right.
So I was hanging around with a bunch of punkers, and I got introduced to who was it? It was the singer of the Adams, a guy named Monty Messick, and he said, "Hey, we're looking for a drummer because our drummer decided he wanted to be a guitar player." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good. Where are you guys at?" And it turns out that they weren't too far away from my parents' house, so I got a friend of mine who had a car to drive my kid over, and I walk in the rehearsals, or not even the rehearsal studio, the basement of the guy's house. And I walk in and I'm looking at these guys and I'm like, these guys aren't punk rockers. What is this? I mean, they got like, kind of like, they were like scum glam guys. And, I was like, okay, the singer's kind of weird looking, real skinny kind of, vibe. The bass player, I believe, was a Vietnam vet. I think he was older. I mean, because I was, 15 or 16, and so he was probably 30 or something. So it was weird playing with a dude that was like, to me, was old, And
Right.
I was like, wow, this is weird. Is he going to have flashbacks while we're playing? Which he actually did, but
Nice.
And then the guitar player, was this guy Jeff, and at that point he had switched from drums to rhythm guitar. And there was another guitar player in the band as well that pretty much looked like how Izzy looks, during the Appetite era. But at that point, Jeff was basically a skater, drummer, guitar player. So
Wow.
I started doing rehearsals with him and started skating a couple backyard pools with Jeff. And as we're skating together, he was just telling me, he's like, yeah, I don't want to be in this punk rock band. I want to move to Hollywood and, kind of join the rock scene or whatever. And at that point, I was so naive. I was like, rock scene? What do you mean, rock scene? Like, Quiet Riot or something like that? He goes, yeah, kind of like that. And I was like, wow, you're a poser.
That's so funny.
So the first show I did with them, so I rehearsed with them, and the stuff that they did was mostly, we covered a bunch of like New York Dolls songs, and we had original songs that sounded like New York Dolls, and I would say it'd be a cross between like the New York Dolls and Social Distortion. So it wasn't really like hardcore fast.
I got
And and then as I'm playing with them, the more I started rehearsing, I think we were rehearsing a lot. We were rehearsing like 3 times a week because we had a show that was booked, a couple months ahead of time. And I was, the guy, Jeff had stopped showing up to rehearsal, which was fine because we had another guitar player. And then finally I went to the singer and I'm like, well, what's going on with Jeff? Is he not in the band anymore? He goes, no, he'll be at the show. He knows the songs. Don't worry about it. And so I ended up playing my first show. I think it was 1980 at a strip bar that used to have bands play every Thursday night or something like that. And I'm like going, Thursday night? I'm like, dude, I got to go to school on Friday. Jeez.
Oh,
so
man.
I ended up grabbing, a friend of mine drove me down with my gear, and I walked in the club, and I didn't realize that, you had to have I had to be 18 and over to get in. And all the other guys in the band, I believe, were 18. And so I was like, so 16 years old. And so I was told that I have to wait outside until it's time to play. And then a security guy would walk me to the stage, let me play, and then have to walk me out. And then he would take all my gear out for me. So it was just kind of strange. And I think, and Izzy did show up, or Jeff showed up. And a bunch of other guitar players showed up. So all of a sudden I was on stage and there was like, oh, we're going to have a special guest come up and play. And I'm like, who are these people? God. Totally being naive. And then finally the older bass player guy, he's like, dude, you're kind of like, you got to chill out a bit. He was like, here, have a beer. And I'm like, yeah, I think I need one. So he gave me, I remember it distinctly. It was a Coors Tall Boy, and I drank all of it and went on stage, and I was kind of hammered.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And we played for an hour, and there's probably about, 25 people there. And then afterwards, word got around that the Adams had picked up a drummer that I could actually walk and count to 4 at the same time, because most of the drummers in L.A. back then were like, oh, I'll play drums. Just give me a drum set, and then they just bash away at it, and they have no idea on how to play, like, how to, do dynamics, like, hey, bring it down in the verse and then you can make it loud in the chorus kind of thing.
Right. Well,
so at that point, I ended up picking up. Word got around, and I started getting offers from a lot of different bands. So I was playing. I think after the Adams, I ended up playing. I think in 3 different bands at one point. The next year, in like '81.
Wow. So you got real busy real quick as a young guy.
Oh yeah. I mean, to me, I didn't expect it, and I didn't know how to. I mean, I knew how to handle it, but it was more logistics, like how do I get around without having a car,
right?
Kind of thing. So, a good friend of mine that was older and had a driver's license got to drive me around, and then at that point, I figured out, oh yeah, I can get a fake ID too, so I can actually stay in the club that I'm playing at rather than waiting outside.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, that's the next logical step, right?
Oh yeah, and then going up to the bar and like saying, "I'll have a beer." What kind? I don't know. A beer.
Yeah.
And they're like, "All right, kid."
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm trying to get my head wrapped around it, but the music scene was so eclectic in Southern California at this time. The early to mid 80s, and I think it was kind of sectored off too. Like if you wanted to see the rock bands, you had to go down like the Strip, right? In Hollywood, and the punk bands had, their camp set up, out in your area kind of deal. And then
it was kind of a guerrilla situation, like what a lot of promoters did. And this even goes back to the big, huge company Golden Voice. What they would do is they would find empty warehouses, and they would just, hit up the landlord and like, dude, you're not renting this out, but we'll rent it for the night for like $100. Then they'd bring in a PA system, and then they'd promote. They would flyer other shows, and then they would have one show at this one warehouse, and then they wouldn't have a show there again, and then it would just move from different areas to different areas.
I got you.
And there was with punk rock, especially in LA, it was a pretty close knit scene. I mean, when I started, it wasn't like there wasn't like 300 people at a show. It was more like 60 to 75 people at a show, depending upon if you're playing North Hollywood, if you're playing the Valley, or you're playing Hollywood, or if you're playing like out in my area in Eagle Rock or Monrovia area. So it would just be people from that area. And I think the whole LA scene, punk rock scene from probably 1981 to 1983 was probably anywhere between, 150 people to 300 people. So you would always see the same people at shows, and then you'd finally get to know each other, and, you would hang around. I got lucky because playing in a band, there was a lot of like punk rock gangs back then. There was like the Circle One gang, and there was a FFF gang, and then there were in Hollywood there was this gang called the Lads. But I guess I got a free pass on all of them because I was a drummer in a band.
Right.
So I got to like hang around with all these gangs, and basically they weren't like a gang that would go out and cause crimes. Well, they kind of would, but their whole thing was like to get together before a show, hang out, have some beers, and then rush the door so they don't have to pay to get in. So I got to hang around with all these different factions, having the free pass, having immunity, I guess, between all these gangs. So I got to hang around with all these different people. So that's where I ended up getting hit up. Hey, you want to play in my band? We're playing tomorrow night. And I'm like, I don't know your music. It's like, don't worry about it. Just show up. I'll cue you on the breaks. It was like, okay, fine.
Yeah. Well, see, I mean, that's cool. And I think a lot of, young players get to experience things like that. They play in a bunch of different bands. But, for far too many musicians of that age and early in their musical careers, if you want to call it that, they just stop doing it. They go off to college or whatever. You know what I mean? And I think if people, I don't know, I guess some people just commit to it. I guess is what I'm trying to say. You just commit to, this is what I want to do.
Right.
And I don't want to skip too far ahead or gloss anything over, but talk to me a little bit about the formation of Junkyard, because you guys all kind of came from punk backgrounds, but that's not exactly what Junkyard was.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we basically, it's funny because like I just done a couple of weeks ago, I did Danko Jones' podcast, and he wanted to know the same thing. It's like, how did a guy from Minor Threat from DC and a guy from Texas and the Big Boys and a guy from LA all get together?
Yeah.
And, it all started out really with, the first time I met Brian Baker was I was playing in a band called America's Hardcore, and it was America's Hardcore. I mean, this music, I listen back to it now, and I'm like, how did I play that fast? I have no clue. And so I was playing in that band, and we had a gig opening up for Minor Threat. So our vans were parked next to each other, and so I just went over and started talking with Brian, and we just started talking about, like, I was asking him questions, you know, basically about Minor Threat, and I think that's the last thing he wanted to hear from. He didn't want to talk about Minor Threat. He wanted to talk about, like, I think skateboarding and just music and stuff like that. So we just started chatting and actually struck up a friendship. And after we played that show out in the valley, it was at some big roller rink. After we did that show, we ended up, the band that I was in, we traveled up to San Francisco to open up for them again. And that's when I got to hang out with him a little more. And so back then, this was 1983. And back then, the only way you communicated with each other was either via writing a letter or making a phone call. So we wrote letters back and forth. We kept in touch. And so then fast forward, I guess, basically to 1984, 1985, when I finally went on my first U.S. tour with a band that I was in called Decry. And Decry was basically a version, it was kind of like, we weren't really hardcore. We were kind of like, if the Dead Boys and Aerosmith got together and decided they wanted to be a punk rock band, that's what Decry was.
Oh, that's
cool. So it was
cool.
really like kind of, it was more rock and punk kind of thing, mixed in with a little fast hardcore stuff, but it was it was songs that actually had a lead guitar in it, which was really strange for back then.
Yeah.
I think the only bands that had like leads back then from LA were like TSOL and the Adolescents, you know, because they had guitar players that could actually play leads. So, so in Decry, we went on our first tour in I think it was 84, because we only did 2 tours. So we did 84 and 85. So in 84, we did a U.S. tour. We bought a van for $150 and hopped in the van, and we had our record company help us book shows. And we ended up doing the whole United States, and we ended up in Texas, and we were playing in Austin. Can't remember the name of the club, but we had heard of the big boys, and we knew who Chris Gates was via the skate community. And all of a sudden, Chris Gates walks in. We're like, oh my God, Chris is here from the big boys. Oh boy, we better be good tonight. And so that was another thing. It was, we hung around with him afterwards and chatted with him, and he hooked us up with a place to stay. And at that point, we exchanged numbers, and I kept in constant contact with him. And he had mentioned to me, like, he goes, I like what Decry is doing, and I kind of want to put a band together. I want to move to LA and put a kind of a rock band together, but more punk rock type of band, rather than like a hardcore band. So at that point, he wanted me and the bass player, Todd Muscat, to be in his new band that he had this idea for. So we kept in touch, and I think Decry had went on our second tour in 85, and that was kind of when things were changing in the LA scene. All the punk rock bands decided they wanted to go rock and roll. Decry decided the same thing, and so we kind of went full bore rock and roll, but we were kind of confused at the time. So we were we looked like a cross between the New York Dolls and like a goth band. I mean, we just looked really silly. We had no clue, and we started hanging around in Hollywood a lot because that's where the rock bands, that was kind of the beginning of the street rock, kind of like Guns N' Roses, East Hollywood scene. So we hung around with a lot of those guys. And I had known Jeff, from back then. And I think actually Guns N' Roses' third or fourth show was opening up for my punk rock band Decry in Chinatown. So we saw them and we were like, ooh, we want to do something like that.
I got you.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And so we went on our tour. And our van broke down in Boston, and we flew back, and that was pretty much the end of Decry. And the core members of the guitar player, bass player, and myself, we decided once we go back to LA, let's start a rock band. So we kind of got rid of the singer, and Decry turned into a band called Shanghai, and then that's how we kind of got into the, you would call it, the glam rock scene back then. Or the street rock scene. It was hard to say. There's so many different bands and so many different labels on it. So,
well, yeah, there were. But I'm going to try to interject a little bit because when you guys came out I was just starting to play, but you had bands at this time, the biggest bands in the world, like you said earlier, Quiet Riot,
Right.
Poison was just starting to make waves. Def Leppard was huge from across the pond. They had been around for a while, but they were kind of starting to change their image a bit. The thing about Junkyard, you guys got a lot of comparisons to Guns N' Roses because you guys didn't really like wear makeup and spandex. Right. You guys weren't the glitter side of that,
We were ugly enough. You add makeup on us, and it's like putting makeup on a pig. It's like, no, man, don't do that. God,
that's so funny. But I mean,
it's like, no, we can't dress like that. No, it'll look silly.
But you had Motley Crue, who and Quiet Riot, who I think everybody said, these are the kings of Hollywood or of the strip, right?
Sure. And even Rat too back then.
Yeah, for sure. So that's what a lot of people. That's what they imagine in their mind when I say, you guys signed to Geffen Records in, 87 or 88, whenever that was. But you guys didn't fit exactly that mold. And, I've told you earlier, I grew up on Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers Band and things like that. And you guys had such a pronounced Southern lean to your band. I just assumed you guys were like from Atlanta or something the first time I heard the band.
We got that a lot. I think that really stemmed from, basically Chris Gates moving out from Austin, Texas to Hollywood. And it wasn't really his general idea to like having the music be Southern influence stuff. It was just basically that's what came out. We weren't specifically saying we have to write this song that sounds like Skinner. We have to write this song that sounds like Molly Hatchet or whatever.
Right.
So we were just we would get together, we would play covers, and the covers that happened to come out would be a ZZ Top cover or a Skinner cover or Molly Hatchet cover or even like a Ted Nugent cover. So it just kind of like came out of us, and so there wasn't like a specific thing like, oh, we're going Southern rock. I think it was really mainly Chris Gates' influences growing up in, Texas and playing that certain style, and it just came out. And it was just crazy how, a bunch of, guys from successful punk rock bands get together, they form a rock band, and it actually comes out to be kind of a Southern rock kind of vibe. We had no intention on doing that whatsoever.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't think you guys... I don't think you guys could ever be accused of being, inauthentic, right? Or not,
right.
But it was just this great roots hard rock music. And, when I first discovered Junkyard, I was convinced you guys were going to be bigger than the Stones or the Beatles. I was like, this is it. So is Geffen Records. So is our manager. So was our lawyer.
God. And, it was, I think like we had said earlier, it basically went, getting a record deal is the easiest part of being in a band. It's once you get the record deal, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
If you have songs, they'll last, but if you don't have songs or if the record label's like, well, we got to fire half the band and bring in a songwriter, then it's like, it's not really authentic. It's not really happening. But with us, we had the songs. The look was like confusing to them, and they just really kind of didn't know how to market us. So they just kind of threw us in with all the other bands that were happening, in 1988, 1989, which is fine because if they would have thrown us in the alternative scene, we probably would have been laughed at. It was like, because back then it was alternative music / college radio stuff, and it was like, REM and stuff. So if we would have been thrown into that whole scene, people would have just looked at us and said, forget it. But, I remember sitting in on a lot of marketing meetings on how we got to do this, we got to do that. And then at one point they said something like, we know that you have full artistic control on how you look and stuff like that, but maybe you guys can dress up a little bit. And of course, at that point, we told them to fuck off.
Well, of course. I mean,
it's like, we're going to be us.
Yeah. Any, good self-respecting rock band is going to tell the guy at the label, blow it out your ass, dude.
Exactly.
So, but And I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but signing with Geffen Records in 1988, I think Guns N' Roses got signed just a little bit before you guys did, but their record...
Yeah, they were signed, I think, I believe, in 86, like late 86, and we were picked up in late 87, or not, like September of 87, because when you sign a record deal, especially back then, the last thing you want to do is sign a record deal at the end of the year because right off the bat you're a tax write-off.
Exactly.
So I think actually we got picked up, I believe, in June of 87. And we were like, oh, great, let's hop right in the studio and record the record and put it out. And it's like, no, it's going to take about a year and a half. And we're like, what?
Yeah.
That's not the way we did it in our punk rock bands.
Right. Well, but Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, arguably one of the best, debut albums, as far as sales of all time. It took that record probably a year and a half to break through after it hit shelves, and then it just kind of exploded. But signing a deal with Geffen Records was a really big deal. They weren't just handing those out to people during that time.
Especially that label, because there was other labels that were interested in us. And I guess once you get the phone call or once you play, like for us, we got lucky because we were from the East Hollywood scene. We had really nothing to do with the Sunset Strip. And the East Hollywood scene really consisted of really, I guess the main band that came out of East Hollywood was probably Jane's Addiction. Like East Hollywood being closer to downtown LA than the Sunset Strip. So we had Jane's Addiction from East Hollywood. You had this other band called the Hangmen. You also had kind of the beginnings of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So, and there was a couple clubs that were part of the East Hollywood scene. One of it, which was called Raji's, and another place called Club Lingerie. And so we never really went like west of a certain street. We never really went up to the Strip. I mean, I think at one point when we were playing around in the clubs, we tried to go up there and flyer, and people just looked at us. It's like, you guys look like a bunch of bikers or roadies. You guys aren't in a band. And they would just take our flyer and throw it on the ground. And we're like, well, fuck these guys. We'll just go back to our side of town.
That's so funny. God.
I remember specifically, it was like, I can't remember who was, oh no, actually we went up there to go see Guns N' Roses. They were playing the Roxy, and we're like, well, we got a flyer because there's going to be a bunch of people. And we had just figured out our logo, and we took we did a picture and we put it on there, and people we'd hand it to chicks and they'd be like, oh, these guys are ugly. And they just throw it on the ground.
That's so
And we'd be like,
funny.
okay, let's go back to our little bar in East Hollywood and, get drunk and, figure out what we're going to do.
Well, I don't mean to put you on the spot with this. And if you don't want to disclose it, you don't have to. But I want to draw a comparison of the way things were in the late 80s on a major label to what they're like now. Do you remember what your budget was for that first record?
Oh yeah, we went over budget. I remember that.
Oh yeah, for sure. When you actually could.
Oh yeah, I remember. I think because the weird thing is, when we got signed, basically we had management at the time, and the people that managed us were two people that ran an iconic LA club called Scream, and the Scream used to have bands. They would put on a show on a Friday night in downtown LA, and they would draw you're talking about a couple thousand people. And the bands were almost secondary because it was kind of a dance club, but they would have bands like Jane's Addiction, like the Chili Peppers. They'd have us. So we ended up, they asked us if they wanted to manage us, and they had a little bit of background in the record industry. So they knew how to get a band into the door, or they knew how to drop off a demo tape to an A&R person rather than just mailing it in and the envelope getting lost in the shuffle with everything else. So they ended up, we did our demo, and they would actually walk into the office and hand it to them. And we had interest early on from, I'd say probably about 3 or 4 different labels, and we would go into the meetings with our management, and we'd walk out of the meeting going, oh my God, we were in a major record label in a conference room talking to these people. We are going to get signed. And of course, the two people that managed us they were like, hold on. This is, they're basically dating you right now. They don't want to know if they want to get in a relationship with you just yet. They're just kind of feeling you out. So When we ended up getting picked up by Geffen, we got the phone call from them, and they said, guess what? Geffen decided they wanted to pick you up. Now we got to get a lawyer, and we're going to basically leave you guys because it's now time for you guys to get real management because we can't handle you guys after you get picked up. You guys need to get a bigger manager to handle like the day-to-day operations of getting played on the radio. And what managers do is that, going into the record label asking for more money or, signing a publishing deal and all that stuff. So when we signed with Geffen, we went in, we had finally I think they decided to sign us. And then a week later, we got an attorney who basically brokered the deal, and he acted as manager. And then we paid off our managers. We gave him, I think we gave him 10% of the deal, and that was it. And the deal was, off the top of my head, I want to say that it was about $300,000. And that was just the record. That was the record budget. We had only negotiated the record budget. And but all we heard was like all these people would get signed, and next thing you know, everybody would be driving around in brand new cars and like moving into a better apartment. And we were like, well, where's that money coming from? They're like, well, you got to renegotiate. Besides the recording costs, you got to negotiate what you want on top of it. And we ended up negotiating kind of an all-inclusive deal where we got a little bit of money. And what we did is, being the punk rockers that we were like, okay, how long can we make each person's money last? So we ended up doing a budget where each one of us got a salary per month. We got an $800 a month salary, and we made that last for a year and a half upon the first time that we got our first checks. And I think each one of us took a $2,000 advance as our big rock star money.
Yeah.
Whereas other people would take $50,000. We would take $2,000. And I think at that point we went out and we still kept our, we had jobs, little jobs here and there, working at like, shoe store, like down on Melrose, working at record shops or clothing stores. So we still kept our jobs, but we still kept our crappy $400 a month apartments. But we went out and bought our Rockstar cars. And I remember specifically my Rockstar car was a 1961 Chevy Biscayne that was seafoam green. It was big as a boat, and it cost me $1,200. Nice.
Well, yeah, I mean, you guys did the smart thing because so many bands of that era, like you said, they would go out and buy a Ferrari and, a $20,000 wardrobe and, go get, thousands of dollars worth of tattoos and. But what nobody really realizes is when you sign that deal and you get that advance money, as they say in the biz, that's basically what you're going to have to live on for the next year and a half until your record comes out and you hope it breaks and you can get on the road with a good tour and have some income coming in. So you guys did it the smart way. So kudos to you.
Well, also, we also, we knew that, hey, this money ain't free. It's going to have to be paid back.
Right.
And so the way I equate it now, it's basically, when all those bands got picked up, Geffen, Warner Brothers, Elektra, all those labels, basically they were predatory lenders. That's all they were. I mean, you were basically getting $250,000, but you'd have to pay back $500,000 or sometimes $1 million. So you'd be like the percentage rate on the loan that they give you was insane. And of course everybody signed it because you're like, oh, I'm in the fancy glass office and I've got to sign the deal so I can get my money to go buy a new pair of pants.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was a crazy time, no doubt. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, I just, I wanted to give everybody a little bit of inside baseball. But, some of my burning questions for you, this great trip down memory lane, where in the world did you come up with your setup? I have never seen, okay? Now, I want to try to paint this picture for folks, and we're going to give everybody your social media stuff at the end here so that they can see pictures. But our good friend Pat here plays this slanted setup. His snare is slanted almost like a jazz drummer away from him. So going into, where your rack tom would be, it's slanted away from him. And that's not so weird for a guy that might play traditional grip, but you don't.
Oh yeah. No.
And your floor tom,
I can't.
yeah, neither can I. Your floor tom is angled as severely as your snare drum towards your kick. So, the first time I saw it, I was like, what the hell is this guy doing? I mean,
exactly. I get that every time.
Yeah. And I'm sure like when you guys go out and do shows even today and you're doing backline or something like that, and you've got, local crews setting up, I'm sure they're like, what do you mean you want it angled away from you? I can only imagine.
Oh, yeah.
But how did that come into being?
Well, the weird thing is, so basically, like going back to like when I got picked up, when the band got picked up on Geffen, and that's when I originally went with I was with Pearl Drums for about a year, and prior to that, the kit that I played in Junkyard, the configuration is the exact same as what I play now. The only time I ever had a rack tom was when we went out on our when we did our second record. But prior to, us getting signed, and when we did get signed, I always had basically a 3-piece kit, just a snare, kick drum, and a floor tom. And I didn't angle it like severe like I did back then. It was basically just, a regular, the seat was a regular height and the snare was a regular height. And then when we did the 6s, 7s, 9s record, that's when I had to jump from Pearl Drums because they were nice at first, and they gave me a great kit. The specs that I had was I always played a 26-inch kick and an 18-inch floor, and they were supporting me pretty well. And then I had a run-in with them, and I was just like, forget it. And this was early 1990 when we went out. We had an opening act called the Black Crows. You may have heard of them.
It seems like I've heard of them. Yeah.
Some small little band from Atlanta. So we had during that run. That's right when I got hit up. A friend of a friend hooked me up with this small company that was starting to make rumbles. This kind of jazz drum company called DW. And so at that point, I was like, well, I'm done with Pearl Drums, so I wanted to go with Ludwig. And so our management just put it out there to every drum company, like, hey, this guy's looking for an endorsement. And a couple of drum companies came back, but DW kind of struck me as a really cool, they were kind of a small mom and pop company. I dug the whole jazz background that they had. And I went out there and met with John Good for, about 6 or 7 hours. And, he basically was like, sit down, son. The professor's going to teach you about wood.
That sounds so like John Good. I'm going to teach you everything you never wanted to know about plies of maple.
And then at the end of it, I'm going to test you.
Right, exactly.
Like, whoa, wait a second.
Yeah, that's so funny.
I remember going out there right before we did the Black Crows tour. I went out there and he did the 6-hour thing, and me and my drum tech are just sitting out there like, is this are we going to be with DW or what's going on? I mean, this guy's like giving us this lecture on wood and all this stuff, and then finally at the end he goes, okay, well, it came down to the configuration of the kit. He goes, okay, well, let's build your kit. And I'm like, am I on the roster? He goes, oh, yeah, of course you're on the roster. You wouldn't be here if you weren't. And I was like, oh, okay, because I thought I was in the principal's office and I got in trouble.
Oh, that's funny.
So at that point, that's when me and my drum tech go, dude, we looked at each other and said, hey, man, why don't you add a rack tom?
Yeah.
I'm like, sure, why not? Let's add 2 floor toms on there. So So when we sat with John, and that was back when all of the shells were done by Keller. I told him I wanted a 26 by 18-inch kick, 14-inch rack, 16 and 18 floor, and so I went to a bigger drum kit, and that was the biggest drum set I think I've ever played in any band. And he told me, he goes, okay, well, everything's good, and we picked up the finish, and he goes, okay, well, it's not going to be ready for about another 8 months, and I was like, oh. I go, can I have a loaner kit or something? He goes, no, we don't have any loaner kits. They're all loaned out to everyone. I'm like, okay, what do I do? He goes, play the kit that you have. Just cover up the Pearl logo. I'm like, well, I've already done that. No problem.
Oh, that's
so we
funny.
ended up, as we were doing the second record, the kit still wasn't available then, but they did give me a loaner kit to record the second album with. So yeah, I was with DW from 1990 until still with DW. But going back to the angles, so what happened is I got back into skating probably in 2006, 2007. And Junkyard we got back together in 2000, and we were playing a couple shows here and there. And right around 2005, we started playing, probably 6 times a year. So we were playing a lot, and I was still skating a lot. And I was skating with a couple guys down at my local park, and we had just got done skating this heavy, heavy pool session. And it's like you're talking about like 8 guys dropping in on each other skating, and everybody's doing tricks. And at that point, I was almost getting back to how I was skating when I was 18. And at the end of it, we go in the parking lot and we have a couple of beers, and we're like, talking, the typical like, talking about the good old days and all that. Well, one beer leads into about 3. And so we go back in the park and skate. And instead of skating the big 12-foot pool, we decided to go in and skate the little 5-foot little like mini half pipe. And we're all doing stuff that we couldn't normally do in a pool because it's a 5-foot half pipe. You can do anything on it. So I started doing all kinds of fun stuff that I hadn't done in years that I can only do on something small. And I ended up going up and doing basically what's called a board slide. And as I came back in, all I heard was everybody going, "Oh my God, that's gnarly." And I was like, "Cool." And as I turned to go back in, I didn't realize that the front of my board was still stuck at the top of the bowl. Ooh. So as I came back in, I turned back in and went straight to the bottom and snapped my left wrist.
Ouch.
And I was of course I was, had a little bit of liquid courage in me, so I didn't feel it right off the bat. So I got up and did the trick again and pulled it off. And then afterwards, I'm like, man, my wrist is killing me. This is not good. And so I went to the doctor the next day, and I got really lucky because the doctor that I went to specializes in musicians with like tendonitis and broken bones and stuff. And he looks at me, he goes, "Yeah, you snapped it." He goes, "It's going to take about 6 months, but you'll be back to normal, semi-normal in about 6 months." And I was like, "Okay, cool." I go, "We don't really have much going on band-wise, so, I can take the time to kind of heal up." And he looks at me, he goes, "Do you have any pictures of you playing drums?" Like, "I got video. I got, here's my phone. Look at it." And he looks at it, and he's like, "Dude, what?" He goes, No. I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You started off playing jazz, didn't you?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "You got to do." He goes, "I tell all these drummers to do this, especially rock and roll drummers. He's like, you got to raise your seat up and lower your cymbals. Why are your cymbals 6 feet high?" I'm like, "I don't know. I never really thought about it because they're easy to reach. I don't know." And he goes, "No, lower everything and raise your seat up and angle your drum like Buddy Rich would angle it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that kind of makes sense." And so I started doing that, and with a cast on. So I started practicing at home, and it took me easily, it took me about 6 or 7 months to figure out how to angle it. Because, the jazz guys playing traditional, they have it angled from left to right. The left side of the snare being the top part, it angles down going to the right, going down to like, I guess, where your kick pedal would be. So I couldn't do that. So as I was trying to figure out the configuration, I would end up turning it to the point where it is now, where it's basically the top part is where the crotch level is, where you're sitting, and then the bottom part is basically it's steep down, almost a 45-degree angle, like straight down.
Yes.
And that's where and then I'd raise the seat even more and raise it more. And then I'd have to get DW to like add an extra post onto the seat so I could sit a little higher. So I finally figured out the comfortability on playing like this. And also the doctor told me, he goes, "If you play like this, you're going to get easily 20 more years out of your wrists." And he was right.
Wow.
So I guess it comes down to really ergonomics.
So it was really, literally a prescription from your doctor. Yeah. Okay. Well, so I just, when I see your setup, I'm like, nobody came up with this on their own. I do have to credit Daru Jones for really kind of like helping me to figure out how to set it up like that. Cause a mutual friend of ours, was his drum tech when he was playing with Jack White. And this goes back to probably 2014 or something like that. 2012. And,
It was actually one of the original drummers for Bad Religion was Daru Jones' drum tech when he was playing on the Jack White tour. So I would talk with the tech about it, and he would like kind of clue me in on how to set up and how to raise the seat up and how to raise the hi-hat stand up really high so you don't cross your sticks and get all like mixed up when you're playing. So that kind of helped me out a bit. And a lot of people compare my setup to Daru Jones' setup because it kind of is the same setup.
Yeah.
Or the same setup that he played with Jack White, because there's the big bass drum and the large floor tom. And that's also when I kind of hit up DW to make me a 5x16-inch snare.
Yeah.
I had played 15-inch snares for the longest time, but I figured, you know what? If I'm going to get back in Junkyard, chances are I'm going to have a couple of cocktails before I play. And if I have a 16-inch snare, no matter where I hit, I'm going to hit the center of it.
That's funny. Well, I mean, it's pretty amazing, that you guys are still doing this. You're, God help me for saying this, but you're one of the few bands of that era that are still out there doing it. And, I mean, obviously you're not doing stadiums like Guns N' Roses are doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, you guys all still get along. You're still,
oh yeah.
I mean, kudos to you guys for that. And, I don't want to be too big a fanboy, but the first two records, I mean, sincerely, I still put Simple Man on at least once every couple of weeks and listen to that tune because it's so damn good. I mean, it's
amazing. Yeah. It's really tested it's tested it's still the lyrical content for both the first and second record, the music, it's still pretty relevant for today. It doesn't sound too dated. And definitely that has a lot to do with obviously the songwriters, but it has to do with the production value as well with Tom Werman doing the first record and especially Ed Stasium on the second record. And all of those guys, both of those producers, we really went to bat to get them, mostly because of their backgrounds. Like with Tom Werman, it wasn't really, wow, Tom Werman did Motley Crue. It's like, no, Tom Werman did Cheap Trick. You know, it's like we were in that whole thing. And then when we did the second record with Ed Stasium, we were like, Ed did the Ramones. Ed did Motorhead. Ed did, he did Living Colour. I mean, let's go with, he did the Smithereens. This is the stuff we like sonically. Yeah. And Ed also had a punk rock background. So both, Tom Werman, because for all intents and purposes, Cheap Trick started off kind of as a punk rock band. So we went with them as producers because they really understood what we were trying to get across. So sonically, I think, especially the second record, 6s, 7s, 9s, that still is a really good sonically sounding record.
Yeah, I mean, the other bands of that era, and of the genre tended to drown things in reverb and delays echoes, and it all sounds really dated now. Like, you hear a snare drum hit and you're still hearing the snare drum hit a second and a half later. You guys didn't. Oh, yeah. You guys didn't do that. And it was just, for a kid from Central Kentucky, it was raw, it was gritty, it was everything I wanted at the time. You know what I mean? It was like it paid.
We did our job.
You did. I mean, it paid homage to my rural heritage. It had this really cool blues and Southern appeal to it. And I love those first two records. And they're fun to listen to. Definitely, it brings me back to funny times of especially during the second record. Our budget obviously went a little higher, so we decided let's go up to San Francisco and record the basic tracks. And it was so funny every time I'd walk in because that was back in the day when you had 2 weeks to do just the drum tracks. And every time I'd walk in the room, Ed Stasium would be like, "Hey, Pat, we're here for 2 weeks. No pressure. It's all on you." I'm like, "Jesus, thanks, dude." He goes, "It's only like $4,000 a day." I'm like, "Oh my God, fuck you." God. Yeah, no doubt. Oh, that's so good.
But it brings me back to those times of and that's the one thing with the band where you go back to we still all get along. Granted, we've had member changes here and there, and people that the current lineup. With me and David and Todd being the original members, our guitar player Tim and our other guitar player Jimmy, everybody was around back in the day. We all knew each other from other bands, and we all hung around with each other. So we never really replaced any Junkyard member with a guy that nobody knew. We always replaced it. It's like, oh yeah, we know him, grab him. It was never an audition kind of thing.
Right. Well,
so that's where we definitely have no drama. Yeah.
And it shows, what are, and I'm just curious, this is my own personal fascination. What are the long-term plans for Junkyard? Are you guys going to continue, doing shows each year? I mean, obviously, you guys don't go out for like 10 months out of the year. You do a handful of shows every year. You've done some recent releases. Are you going to continue recording? I mean, is it, I guess, what is the long-term plan, or is there one?
There is none.
Okay, good.
we just roll. I mean, I guess, we never thought we would actually do a brand new studio release. And, as things happen, the guy, Rick from Acetate Records, who's an old friend of the band's, he's like, hey, I'll put out a new record for you. So that's where High Water came out in 2017. And we never really thought about recording a new record when we got back together, but it kind of made sense. It's like, yeah, let's do it for ourselves. Let's put this new thing out because, people seem to want it. We went from playing 4 to 6 shows a year up to playing 20 shows a year. And we were like, well, let's do this. And that way it'll give us, some more vacation time. I guess our vacation time is spent going out on the road where other people go to like Hawaii. Well, we go to a dingy club in Baltimore,
That's so true, man. So true.
We, when we did High Water, we were like, oh, and we had a person. I think I was booking. Me and the guitar player Tim were basically handling all the day-to-day stuff and booking shows. So at that point, we were like, oh, we kind of need a booking agent. We kind of need a manager, and so we ended up getting a booking agent. And in 2017, we ended up doing probably about 30 shows. We did a couple festivals, and then 2018, I believe we did. No, 2017, I'm sorry. Yeah, we did like 40 something shows. And then 2018, we did 50 shows. I mean, for us, that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of vacation time.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
So we just basically rolled with it. And, when we signed the deal with Acetate, basically it was a 2-record deal. And, so High Water was the first release. And, we came across a situation where a lot of our old demos, because we did have a 3rd record that we were supposed to do for Geffen, and they dropped us while we were doing it. So Acetate and ourselves and our manager got together and said, let's finally put this 3rd record out and put a pin in it. And, a lot of the songs we aren't going to play live, but that way it's like this is more of a fan release.
Yeah.
And we put that out in November, and that's called Old Habits Die Hard. And that's basically it's basically 13 songs. It's the songs that should have been on the 3rd Geffen release that never came out. So we did that. But while we were curating that and getting all the artwork together and remastering it, we're still in the process of writing the follow-up to High Water. And that's probably going to come out, well, now with this whole virus situation, it kind of pushes things back a bit. But we are going to have we're going to have a new single that's going to be coming out in probably July. That's called Rock and Roll Lifer. And it's basically, and then the B-side is a song called Devil on My Shoulder. And we've recorded those. We're just kind of waiting on, I guess businesses to open up again so we can print it out on vinyl.
Yeah.
And so that's probably July. Our tour plans for this year, we did, we made it a point to like kind of mellow out for this year and only do maybe 20 shows, 25 shows this year because we wanted to concentrate on writing the new album and recording it. And so we started off the year doing 4 shows with Danko Jones, which were just amazing for us being huge fans of him. And luckily we didn't have anything booked from February until July. So this whole lockdown really doesn't affect us too bad.
Well, that's
it may
good.
affect us for July. It depends. We'll see what happens in July. But and then in August, we do plan on doing a 2-week ground run, starting off in Las Vegas and ending probably somewhere in Minneapolis. But we don't know if that's going to happen.
Yeah.
We're kind of in a holding pattern as well as everybody else is right now.
Yeah, it's frustrating, that you can't go see a live show, you can't go play a live show. It's pretty nuts. And You know,
I feel bad for the bands, like, all the other bands that had shows and tours booked, and they had to cancel them. I mean, a lot of these acts, when you do go on the road, it's not like, your guarantee. You're not living off of your guarantee. You're living off of merch sales. And a lot of these bands, I mean, they do really well on merch. And for us, we do really well on merch as well when we play live. So when we come back and we settle up after the weekend and we pay off our expenses, we each get a, nice chunk of change where we can go like have a nice dinner and maybe buy one of our guitar players can buy a new guitar from it. We're not being rich from it, but some of these acts really depend upon their live shows and their merch sales. And when you take that away, all these guys are scrambling to try to find out what they can do during this downtime. And we've actually on our webpage, we put together a list of links of how people can help out other bands or clubs that are doing a GoFundMe campaign that are kind of shut down right now, because we figure it's like if all of these links are in one spot, it's easier for somebody to go pick and choose. Oh, I want to help out like the guitar player from LA Guns is offering guitar lessons. Well, I can, let me click this link, or we offer a link where you can take a guitar lesson from our guitar player, Jimmy James. And there's also there's also links on there where you can help out like a club we play in Seattle called Funhouse. They need money, otherwise they're going to go out of business. So you can, drop $10 here, drop $10 there.
Right.
And for us, we actually put together where our merch sales, every time somebody buys, anything from our website, portions of our sales go to Meals on Wheels for, senior citizens that can't get out and get their own food. So we've done pretty well. And we also dropped the prices on our merchandise because, nobody has any money right now. So that way we can kind of give it back to the people and then also donate to the Meals on Wheels campaign. And once we get through that, we may end up donating to the musicians relief fund or something like that, So we're trying to pay it forward as much as we can to help out clubs and other friends of ours and bands that have helped us out along the way.
Yeah, man, that's just so kind of you guys. And, I'm not trying to plug myself at all, but, I took it upon myself about a week or so ago to hit your website and replace my, Junkyard Spade t-shirt. I bought one, I want to say in 1989, and it was...
it's time to replace it.
It was time to replace it. Well, and back in those days, I was wearing a small. So,
right.
you know what I'm saying? So I did order a Junkyard shirt, and I'm expecting it to be here today. And
you will get it today, yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for helping others out. And I want to be respectful of your time. We've already taken up so much of your time this morning. We got to have you back for a part 2.
Absolutely.
For sure. I mean, I feel like we could sit here and talk for probably 4 or 5 hours about,
yeah. The Danko podcast that I did, I think we chatted for about 3 hours, and he was like, God, I gotta edit this down to 45 minutes. I was like, good luck. This is what you do.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hey, I don't edit down, man. We'll just do a part 2 and we're good.
There we go. Perfect.
But, one of the things that we always try to do here on the podcast is we always ask our guests for a good piece of advice. And, you've been doing this for a long time and you're just such a cool guy. And, I love your band. What kind of advice would you offer to, other drummers, other musicians, that they can use in their day-to-day life?
Oh man. Wow. Good question. I would say practice, but if you've gotten to the point, like, we always joke in Junkyard about it. It's like, we got to rehearse these songs again. If we don't know them by now, we shouldn't even be playing them. We joke about rehearsals being an insult to our intelligence. Yet when you go back in and you play, you realize, oh, you actually do need to rehearse.
Yeah.
But I would say just, for drummers that are coming up, there's no rush. Take it easy. Learn your craft. Definitely go back. I mean, try not to pigeonhole yourself into any certain genre of music. Listen to everything. Be open-minded. Obviously, there's things that everybody likes and doesn't like, but have a little bit of an open mind on listening to things, and definitely listen to the dynamics. Dynamics being key. also, like, I guess, there's a lot of drummers that are kind of, and I've ran across a lot of them, and I'm not meaning to bash on anybody, but a lot of them, their egos are really big, and they think it's like, look at me. It's, one guy that, I think he's probably a really nice guy, but is that guy Zoltan Chaney. It's like, dude, sit down and play the drums. It's like you look like a circus animal. I mean, it's rad. No disrespect. I mean, it's insane what he's doing, but it's like, you're gonna break your neck, dude.
Yeah, I mean, that is a special brand of showmanship, no doubt. I mean, it's pretty
That's
crazy.
Like Cirque du Soleil or something.
Yeah. But
he's good. I mean, the thing is, I've heard him play like when he's just sitting down playing, and it's like, there you go. You're not dropping beats left and right. But I guess certain people, like, there are drummers that have their egos, and some drummers rightly so. But it's like, you got to remember, you're basically driving the car, and know that once you know that and you have confidence in it, man, that's like 90% of the battle. And then at that point, you can do a little flash and a little bit of stick twirls and stuff like that, but kind of just hone your craft, study everybody, not necessarily like playing, but just watching. I mean, there's so many things like with YouTube. I mean, I never had YouTube as a kid. I would just sit around and wait for like Don Kirshner's rock concert to come on TV, or like, whoever the guest was on Saturday Night Live, to watch the drummer play. But now with the with YouTube and everything, I mean, people can watch like oh, that was weird. People like, like old punk rock drummers like Chuck Biscuits, who to me is like probably the biggest influence on myself. I mean, that guy would just beat the crap out of the drum set, yet he wouldn't drop a beat. So there's all these places where you can go watch these people, watch old Buddy Rich clips, or watch the Buddy Rich clips where he bashes on his bands, and, on his guys. And that's like something not to do unless you are the, main member of the band. But, and even then, don't treat people like shit. But, it's, I would say just, definitely be open-minded, listen to everything. I don't know, make sure to play to a metronome. It's always going to bite you in the ass on the way. Everybody plays, once you go into a studio, it's like, oh, we got to set up the click track. I remember the first time that I played with a click, I was seamless with the click because I grew up with a musical teacher that was, would beat a drumstick on a desk, and that was the tempo. So to me, I actually like playing with a click because, I can kind of relax and play around with the click and kind of play behind it a bit or kind of ahead of it. So, but I would just say, for drummers, be open-minded. Don't worry about endorsements. Buy, get the gear that you want, get the gear that you like. Endorsements are, it's endorsements. They don't endorse you. You endorse the product, and if you like that product, you buy it. And then eventually, if, you become successful in a local scene or a national scene or a worldwide scene, that company will take notice, and you will get, you'll get your stuff at a certain percentage off, and they'll promote you. And, but yeah, it seems like so many drummers out there are really, really into the whole endorsement thing. And it's, then again, I guess maybe I'm lucky because having the years behind me, and having the companies behind me, DW, Senten Cymbals, Los Cabos, Aquarian Drumheads, I guess I'm lucky in that sense, where the years that I got to do all of this stuff, it kind of helps out. But, I mean, getting deals with Los Cabos wasn't as easy as, oh, yeah, I'm going to endorse you, give me a deal. Right. It's a lot of promoting the company. Even if you don't, if you're not going to get an endorsement, just promote the company. If you like Tasty Cymbals, great, promote them. These people do pay attention to young drummers.
Yeah, and here's another thing that we talk about a lot on this show. I don't care. You can set up a DW kit, a Pearl kit, a Yamaha kit, whatever brand. I'm gonna sound like me.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you want to play what you want to play, and I certainly have my opinions as to what I think sounds the best. But, I mean, you mentioned YouTube. There's a YouTube video of Benny Greb playing a SpongeBob SquarePants drum set.
Exactly, yeah.
And you know what? He sounds like Benny Greb. I mean,
exactly.
So it's not necessarily about the gear, but man, that's just a ton of good advice that you dropped there. And I certainly appreciate it.
I like what you say about the gear. It's more about the play. I mean, that even lends itself to guitar players. I mean, you can have a guitar player that has a 59 Les Paul that's playing through a nice vintage Marshall amp, but then you hand him some like no-name guitar and he's playing through like a, computer stereo, and guess what? He sounds just like himself. It's all about your style and how you hone your craft after so many years.
Yes. That's just so true. And it's such good advice. Pat, brother, man, you are welcome here anytime. We'll do
a part 2.
Yes.
We will definitely do a part 2.
I look forward to the part 2 coming up. So, man, stay safe out there. Stay healthy.
You too.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you taking the time, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
All right, man. All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 99 of the Drum Shuffle. As always, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We simply can't do this show without each and every one of you tuning in each and every week. We truly do appreciate that. As I always do, I'm going to ask you to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to listen in to the Drum Shuffle. It helps us tremendously. Leave us a thumbs up, a star rating, a review, wherever it is that you tune in. That helps other folks find us. And the most helpful thing you can do is share a link with a friend. If you know of a drummer or a musician that might like to hear what we do over here at the Drum Shuffle, send them a link. Say, hey, check this show out. And we do appreciate your efforts on that. Guys and girls, next week will be our 100th episode. And to be perfectly honest with you, I have no idea what I'm going to do yet, but I am going to try to make it special. So make sure you tune in next week for our 100th episode. I promise we'll do something crazy and cool. As always, we answer every single email that we get here at the Drum Shuffle Podcast. The email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com, and you can always find more information on me over at jamieeads.com. We have all sorts of social media links over there, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it. You can follow us in those places as well, and we do appreciate that. On top of everything else that you give and do for the show, we do appreciate those social media follows. Guys, I can't say this enough. Please stay safe, stay healthy, do your part, do whatever you can to help your neighbors, to help others. Our guest today, Patrick, talked about that quite a bit, how you can try to pay it forward in simple ways. Visit the Junkyard website, order a t-shirt like I did. Visit your favorite artist's website, buy a t-shirt, buy a vinyl, buy a CD, buy a bumper sticker. It doesn't matter. We need to help our artist community because we are all struggling. And, somebody said something that I thought was pretty impactful the other day. They said, when we all got locked into our houses and we started binging Netflix, listening to music, watching live streams of musicians, just remember, in your darkest time, you turn to art. And I think that's a really good message. So let's support one another, stay safe, stay healthy, and until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.